You are welcome to another edition of NSC 301, which is study session 9. And this will discuss epidemic disease occurrence. Like we have discussed earlier on, we have discussed about epidemics, we have discussed about endemic, pandemic, and so on. Now we want to look about epidemic disease occurrence. The amount of a particular disease that is usually present in a community is referred to as the baseline or endemic level of the disease. This level is not necessarily the desired level, which may in fact be zero, but rather is the observed level. In the absence of intervention and assuming that the level is not high enough to deplete the pool of susceptible persons, the disease may continue to occur at this level indefinitely. At the end of this study session, you'll be able to describe the concept of disease occurrence, be able to highlight and explain the causes of disease occurrence, be able to discuss the level and factor that increase host exposure to diseases. Let's look at the concept of disease occurrence. A critical premise of epidemiology is that disease and other health events do not occur randomly in a population, but are more likely to occur in some members of the population than others because of risk factors that may not be distributed randomly in the population. As noted earlier, the most important use of epidemiology is to identify the factors that place some members at greater risk than others. Thus, the baseline level is often regarded as the expected level of a disease. Some diseases are so rare in a given population that a single case warrants an epidemiologic investigation, like rabies, plague, polio. Other diseases occur more commonly so that only deviations from the norm warrant investigation. Sporadic refers to a disease that occurs infrequently and irregularly, while endemic refers to the constant presence and or usual prevalence of a disease or infectious agent in a population within a geographic area. We can have hyperendemic, which refers to persistent high levels of disease occurrence. Moving to the causes of disease occurrence. Agents, host, and environmental factors interrelate in a variety of complex ways to produce disease. Different diseases require different balances and interactions of these three components. Development of appropriate, practical, and effective public health measures to control or prevent disease usually requires assessment of all three components and their interactions. Agents originally refer to an infectious microorganism or pathogen, which can be a virus, a bacterium, or a parasite, and other microbes. Generally, the agent must be present for disease to occur. However, presence of that agent alone is not always sufficient to cause disease. A variety of factors influence whether exposure of an organism will result in disease, including organism's pathogenicity, that is the ability to cause disease and dose. Host refers to the human who can get the disease, and a variety of factors, both intrinsic to the host, sometimes called risk factors, can influence an individual's exposure, susceptibility, or response to a causative agent. Environment, which is the third component of the first causes of disease, refers to the extrinsic factors that affect the agent and the opportunity for exposure. Environmental factors include physical factors such as geology and climate, biologic factors such as insects that transmit the agent, and socioeconomic factors such as crowding, sanitation, and the availability of health services. Let's look at the level of diseases. Occasionally, the amount of disease in a community rises above the expected level. Epidemic refers to an increase, often sudden, in the number of cases of a disease above what is normally expected in that population in that area. Outbreak carries the same definition of epidemic, but is often used for a more limited geographic area. Cluster refers to an aggregation of cases grouped in place and time that are suspected to be greater than the number expected. even though the expected number may not be known. Pandemic also can refer to an epidemic that has spread over several countries or continents, usually affecting a large number of people. Epidemics occur when an agent and susceptible host are present in adequate numbers, and the agent can be effectively conveyed from a source to the susceptible host. More specifically, an epidemic may result from a recent increase in amount or virulence of the agent, a recent reduction in a recent introduction of the agent into a setting where it has not been before. It can be a disease can also result from an enhanced mode of transmission so that more susceptible persons are exposed. We can have a change in the susceptibility of the host response to an agent. What are the factors that increase host exposure? It can be common source outbreak, point source outbreak, continuous common source outbreak, and propagated outbreak. Let's look at each one of them. Common source outbreak is one in which a group of persons are all exposed to an infectious agent or a toxin from the same source. In some common source outbreaks, case patients may have been exposed over a period of days, weeks, or longer. In point source outbreak, the group is exposed over a relatively brief period, so that everyone who becomes ill does so within an incubation. In continuous common source outbreak, the range of exposures and range incubation periods tends to flatten and widen the peaks of the epidemic curve. The epidemic curve of an intermittent common source outbreak often has a pattern reflecting the intermittent nature of the exposure. In propagated outbreak, it results from transmission from one person to another. Usually, transmission is by direct person-to-person contact, as with syphilis. Transmission may also be vehicle-borne, for example, transmission of hepatitis B or HIV by sharing of needles, and it can also be vector-borne by transmission of yellow fever by mosquitoes. In propagated outbreaks, cases occur over more than one incubation period. Thank you for listening. Bye for now.